Of Debt Nation, where we are busy putting death out of business, and this is going to be a great episode. I'm so looking forward to this episode with Mr. Daniel Faggella. Why? Because we're gonna delve into something really big here, and it's called AI, okay? Artificial intelligence. And he's going to help us work out what's going on with AI in the market. So if you're in the market right now and you're looking at all your stocks drop, we're going to work out some reasons why that might be happening, but also we're going to talk about how AI is going to impact business in the future and longer term consequences of AI. Before we cross over to the great gentleman, I want to thank Thrivous. Now, Thrivous by Lincoln Cannon over there is doing a great job. That's nootropics, geoprotectors, and all sorts of other things there. You have to check out Thrivous. And if you say thanks to Thrivous, and if you throw the link around, that goes from $5 all the way up to $160. The more people that share the episode, the more Thrivous you're going to win. And in these hard times, why wouldn't you take that deal? It's the best deal on the internet. I also want to thank David Kelly, I Am Transhuman, for sponsoring this episode and helping to keep the show alive. Keep the show alive, because this is what we really need. I'm going to be struggling with that a little bit since I lost my job to this stupid virus. But we will continue to push on, because these are the conversations that we have to have. All right, we're going to cross over to Daniel. So, Daniel, just quickly introduce yourself and to the audience and whatever history you would like to explain to them about who you are. Are you an AI yourself? Are you a robot? I don't know.
Yeah. I sometimes wonder, but no, I think for the most part, I'm not. So yeah,
I'm the Turing test. I am the Turing test.
Yeah. I'd be pretty solid if I was, man. I'm not gonna lie. If I was programmatically generated, I would be impressed with myself. But alas, I'm immortal. So I run a company called Emerge Artificial Intelligence Research. So our work involves tracking what's possible and what's working with AI in major sectors. So a lot of our work is looking at areas like banking and wealth management, insurance, and to some degree defense in the public sector, and looking at where is this technology making a difference. So big enterprise companies that are making expensive decisions about allocating funds will use our research to build strategies and pick high ROI projects. So that's the name of the game. And we do a lot of speaking around the world at United Nations headquarters, for the OECD, the World Bank, and global financial institutions for sort of the near-term implications and the ROI of artificial intelligence. The reason I got these big ears of mine is because I paid my way through graduate school by training fighters. So I ran a mixed martial arts gym from the age of 20 through 24 when I sold that business, and moved on to e-commerce and to artificial intelligence and other things like that. So my ears are a little bit beat up from that part of history, but alas, today I don't do that much fighting. I do a lot more research. So that's my backdrop and what we do.
Well, I didn't notice that, and that is really, really interesting. Mixed martial arts, and yeah. Tell us, is there any correlation between mixed martial arts and the AI world? Is there any metaphor there?
Not as far as I can tell. I'm not one of these. I think a lot of people that have a black belt. So I have a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So I trained for a long, long time, won national tournament, did a lot of competing, did a lot of seminars in the United States, some seminars in Brazil. A lot of people who sort of get the black belt sort of will always talk about its sort of lofty impact on their virtues and things like this. I think honestly you can build character selling encyclopedias door to door just as much as you could in martial arts. So I don't call it anything more than it was. I'm grateful for it. Should anyone, it's very unlikely, but should anyone tackle me, I think I'd be adequately prepared to sort of, put them unconscious. But the only connection, just in terms of where it came from, was I went to University of Pennsylvania for graduate school to study skill acquisition. So I went in for my master's for skill acquisition and skill development. This was my focus under Martin Seligman for his positive psychology program. And while I was there studying what is kind of adult learning, studying the neural correlates and the cognitive correlates of learning, and how to learn faster, that was really my goal. It was not sort of understanding dyslexia. It was how do we learn faster as athletes, whether it's memorization, musical performance, just what is that field? While I was there, the computer science folks kind of tapped me on the shoulder and said, hey, they're doing this cool stuff called machine learning that you should check out. You're doing all this adult learning, like they're trying to model what the brain does, but in machines. And this is back in the early days when they're starting to train natural language processing systems to understand Twitter. This is 2011, right? 2011. So I'm sort of like hearing those rustles in the breeze. And by the time I got done with that degree at UPenn, I kind of decided, man, the consequences of this in the next 30 years are going to be so grandiose that I'm going to damn well dedicate my life to understanding where the hell this is taking us and what the impacts are for business people like myself. At the time, again, I was training fighters. It's literally how I was paying for graduate school, was running this gym. So that's the only connection. There is no other connection. There's no natural.
There's no mixed metaphor there. Okay, all right. So
yeah.
But yeah, no, that's really interesting. And also before we rock into the AI and the near in-term aspects of AI, what you also were involved with transhumanism. You had a show. Would you like to just expand on that and your transhumanist associations?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I'm not formally a transhumanist. I'm not formally in any party. Just any party. Just straight up. So I don't. It's just not my deal. But I'm very congenial to many notions in that world. So when I initially got into this space, Steele, some of my very earliest interviews when I got into AI and its consequences. Sure, I talked to people about near term. I talked to a bunch of people that were raising money to start AI companies. That was really exciting back in 2012. There actually weren't that many of them. But I also talked to people like Nick Bostrom, people like Ben Goertzel, people like James Hughes, people who had thought about the longer term consequences of AI. So right from the start, my focus was near term, kind of like where is it hitting the ground? Where's the rubber meeting the road? And also long term, where the heck is this stuff taking us? And so while I'm not necessarily a transhumanist, I'm very sympathetic to many of the ideas because I think there's a certain inevitability to brain-computer interface to more advanced AI in the next 30 to 40 years. And I think that the trajectory of intelligence itself is the most morally consequential possible thing. And so that's what got me interested in what I guess could be broadly bucketed as the transhuman set of ideas. So that's the kind of intersection there. I'm still interested and involved there. I write very regularly on my personal site about those things. I've given 4 different TED Talks about more transhuman type themes. But my day-to-day and the value for our clients is really more the near term. So I keep a balance. I spend most of my time in the near term, but always had a lot of love for understanding the longer term and the great thinkers that have given those things some ardent thought.
Wow, yeah, that's really impressive. And, I really want to get Nick Bostrom on the show and Anders Sandberg and a bunch of them. I think Ben Goertzel as well. I think these guys really have just a huge wealth of knowledge there about these emerging issues and these implications of AI. Now, let's talk about AI in finance. Now, the big story around the world right now is markets crashing. Okay, and you could look at this from a sort of fundamental way and an AI way. Is there anything in there that you might like in the headlines in the news or anything that might be this crash might be a little bit accelerated by AI, or what do you think about in terms of AI and this current crash? Is there anything there?
Yeah, I can't meaningfully discern that much attribution to artificial intelligence. There is some credence to the idea that a lot of these trading systems and a lot of the people that are sort of governing and to some degree directing and building and augmenting them are pretty well plugged into the news cycle and pretty well plugged into other kinds of unstructured data sources that may or may not be kind of informing the way that they're making decisions. So the most advanced forms of this that we're aware of are sort of like the hedge fund world. It's super experimental in terms of making the what we call sort of making the unquantifiable quantifiable, and then being able to use algorithms to garner some degree of signals about trade volumes, about predictions for certain kinds of markets, and looking at satellite data to estimate how many people are eating at restaurant chains, like the big stuff, right? But I think on the day-to-day, natural language processing for the news cycle, for sort of what's happening, is a big part of the mix. So it's possible that sort of pull may have triggered, what some of these sort of algorithmic systems are doing, or may have steered the decisions of the humans that are running them, because the information that's getting fed to them is quite negative, at least at present. So, but that's suppositions. To be frank, the most of the consequences of artificial intelligence in finance are, in terms of like the deeper, long ball, hardcore machine learning stuff, is actually not as much in wealth management as it is in other areas. So if you talk to me in 8 years about where sort of the market's going up or down, sort of how we might attribute that to AI, I think there'll be a more robust answer. Right now, I think these are sort of aggrandized versions of the systems that existed 15 years ago.
Yeah.
And
yeah, that was going to be
some NLP.
That was going to be my next question, because let's talk the near-term aspects of AI in finance, right? Let's talk about that. But can you actually just take us through the acceleration from, let's say, the 80s forward? Because just what is the history of AI in finance up until now? Because the near-term application of AI in finance is changing it rapidly now, but it's also evolved very, very fast in our recent history, right? So just to give the audience an understand, what is the context, historical or otherwise, of AI in finance? Is there any context?
Yeah. I mean, well, certainly. So most of the preponderance of my research is on near-term vendor landscape, near-term investment portfolios of AI of the let's say top 7 U.S. banks by revenue, for example, that we track super, super carefully. It's one of our products is essentially based on that competitive intel. So a lot of this stuff is super near-term. But if I look at my anecdotal understanding of how these things have evolved, and context from interviews from people who luckily have been in the game for longer than I, the cool place to go as somebody who's working on AI, if you went to Cornell for AI in 1999, going to work on Wall Street would be the cool thing to do. So today, of course, they all go to Mountain View. And I lived in Mountain View /San Francisco for 2.5 years. And that is indeed where they go. The good schools in Boston, the good schools in wherever, they go to essentially one geolocation. But the cool place used to be Wall Street. So the history of AI on Wall Street, to some degree, is similar. There's some focus areas that are somewhat similar to what we're seeing level up now. One of those is wealth management, so being able to beat the market. This is a tough ball game. This is really hard. But being able to find those incremental edges, being able to find ways to model systems where maybe we can have some edge in the competition, is sort of a domain where, for the last 2 to 3 decades, there's definitely been action. The other side here, that might be a little bit more on kind of like the payments or money transfer, money laundering side of things, is detecting fraud. So machine learning for, let's say, credit card fraud is a way older ball game than machine learning for detecting fraudulent accounts on Airbnb, than machine learning for detecting a fraudulent purchase on Wayfair.com. So it's a much older ball game in the financial space, or the American Expresses of the world and the Citibanks of the world. And so that domain, which is still very hot today, in fact, hotter than most people think from our research, just a fraud compliance writ large, very, very big AI application area, low-hanging fruit in terms of value. There's a lot to go into there. But that area is actually quite old as well. Now, what's new about sort of AI now is that the capabilities of these technologies are leveling up. So how much farther, or how many new kinds of patterns we can sort of coax forth from unstructured data in the world, and what we can do with that to inform our market decisions is sort of leveling up. What we can do in terms of fraud detection and sort of building out the robustness of those systems is leveling up. But also, a lot of the other business functions are starting to fill out with their own plethora of AI applications. So sales enablement, customer service, areas around cybersecurity now, machine learning is sort of par for the course. In the next 5 years, essentially anybody who isn't using a system that's to some degree predicated on machine learning in their cybersec solution is going to be behind the times drastically, like embarrassingly dangerously, to be honest. And so the rest of the band of business functions and processes are starting to now flesh their way out. So that's kind of the difference, but there definitely are those similar tracks. Fraud kind of has its original sort of upbringing in sort of the finance world. And certainly wealth management is never going out of style. Everybody's going to want to beat the market, and AI is a big part of that. So that's a little bit of past and now.
And what do you think about the idea of competition so there's competition with countries who would like to compete to extract the new oil, which is the data, and there's also competitions between businesses and finance companies and credit card companies. Do you think that the competition, the innovation competition side, muddles, helps, or distresses? What do you think about that? Do you think that innovation is competitive innovation in AI and finance is good or bad?
I mean, it's to some degree a bit of a tough question in terms of its implications on the market. I almost feel like kind of nobody's an expert on the market, but is that competition going to create more, let's say, volatility? To use a sort of common parlance here, it might. There's a chance that in wealth management there'd be some dangerous iterations, but the fact of the matter is, Steele, the adoption of this technology is very slow and very arduous. And so a couple bits of context here. So
yes, please.
To make, let's say, most AI deployments within finance, let's say a Citibank, let's say an American Express, let's say a Capital One, whatever. Most innovation, we know this because these are clients. So these are people that we're watching in real time, sort of over the course of the last 18 months, try to adopt these different technologies. There's a lot of struggle to bring a new AI project to life. So this is more context than your audience needs, but I'll be very brief about it. To say, let's just make a chatbot work. So, we want to answer basic customer service questions at our bank. We're Wells Fargo. We have bajillions of inbound customer service questions, and let's just say retail banking. So personal checking and savings accounts, right? So what's my balance? Can I transfer money? How much should I spend on groceries? These kinds of questions. To just set that up implies tremendous heavy lifting in terms of streamlining how those chat answers come into the system, in terms of understanding our past and current corpuses of data, in terms of what questions get asked most frequently, in terms of understanding which of those questions are within a bounded reality. So there's only maybe 8 major ways to ask how much is my balance. There's really not that many, man. It's not infinite. But there's some questions that, while common, are much harder to bound. They're much harder to sort of put a wrapper around in terms of the reasonable number of permutations that people could ask. So finding the low-hanging fruit for what is even answerable involves massive cleaning and harmonization of tremendous volumes of data from possibly across desperate, ugly, ancient services like silos. And then understanding that information, so pulling experts in the room and really getting an understanding of these past volumes, understanding which of these low-hanging fruit snippets are reasonable and which of them would deliver business value, and then a very long process of developing the application and testing it live with customers after that. I mean, this is years, plural, often. So, maybe it's only going to be, let's call it, optimism would be like 7 months to have like a tiny little sandbox pilot that we could test like some neat little stuff and maybe run it by a couple customers and kind of see what they sort of think. And it's not going to be deployed in this format. It's in a larval state, but 7 months and a lot of heavy lifting with data, relatively speaking, to get us to something somewhat larval. Now, is that to say it's not worth it? No, it's not to say it's not worth it. It's to say it's effing hard. So it's very, very hard to make these, to build on top of data is exceedingly hard. So for that reason, gargantuan disruption, customer service changing overnight, no. Wealth management changing overnight, no. Compliance changing overnight, no. These are very slow upgrading processes. However, financial institutions understand that 5 years from now, when everybody else has a smaller call center than you because they're automating this stuff, you're in literal hot water.
Yeah.
Literal hot water. And so there's a preeminent focus on making this stuff happen. But the only reason we're in business is because people need to focus on the stuff where they can actually expect to get their money back. There's a lot of ways to waste money with AI innovation. So they know they need to build these foundations. But to be honest, Steele, it's quite slow. It's not going to be overnight. So that's a kind of shot across the bow, I think, for the audience here.
Wow. Yeah, that's really interesting. Well, is there anything else you want to say about finance? Otherwise, we'll move on to AI in business.
Yeah, we can go right into the bigger picture in business, man. Let's dive in.
All right, yeah. So, what's the upcoming impact of AI in business? I mean, this is a huge question. Lots of
Yeah,
small businesses, big businesses, medium businesses.
there's a lot to say here. I mean, in terms of the overall consequence, just things that I think would be useful for people to understand. One of them is that the preponderance of the focus here is going to be from the enterprise side. So the ability to all of these technologies are feeling out they're getting their sea legs, so to speak, with the big enterprises. So a company like Casisto that does chatbots in banking, and I'm only mentioning that. I'm actually not. Chatbots are not the most exciting area of AI in banking to me at all. I'm much more interested in a lot of our work is the risk-related stuff, fraud and compliance and whatnot, where a lot, frankly, astronomically more money is being spent and astronomically more near-term ROI is being seen. Chatbots are cool, but we were talking about the example. So Casisto is a vendor. They're one of the reputable vendors in that space. They are not offering their services to mom and pop level banks. Little community banks in Wisconsin are not really meaningfully being able to apply these technologies today. Maybe they'll have sales material that'll say it. I don't know if Casisto does. I don't think they do. But they need big, big corpuses of data. They need big, big dollars from these people to spend all the time to actually breathe life into one of these lengthy, arduous projects. And they also need often some degree of in-house expertise about our data, about our business processes that can be devoted to working with that vendor and figuring out and shaking out how to get value from this data. It is a fight. It is a fight. Vendors that call it push button are obviously selling something. That's what a vendor is. You can't blame them, but it's a fight. So the innovation for at least the next 2 to 3 years, we can really expect to be upmarket, big time upmarket. The innovation on tools like, oh, here's some new, platform from which we can deploy AI models. Oh, here's some new platform from which we can store data and do things. That ecosystem will evolve in the nascent startups, the startups in fintech, the startups in e-commerce, maybe even the startups in logistics, in areas where they do have high data volumes, but they're baked on top of kind of a data core. They're super data savvy from the get-go. Those folks are often going to be the petri dish for the tools. But the actual applications, banking, oil and gas, brick and mortar retail, big, stodgy trillion-dollar sectors, big fat enterprises is where the action is at. So if people are listening in and you run a small company, you shouldn't necessarily worry yourself about, oh, should I be using AI? The answer is almost certainly no. The cost barriers, the data barriers, the expertise barriers, it's almost intentionally not accessible for most smaller companies.
Wow, really? Well, because
Yeah.
the conventional wisdom is usually that these as everything improves, as AI improves, as it becomes more washes out into society more, the accessibility improves for everybody. That's consumers, small businesses, medium business, and large businesses. But you're mentioning a barrier to entry. That's a first.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, to some degree, it's harder than, well, in many degrees, geez, not some
Is it
degree.
the infrastructure? Is it infrastructure? Is that what the problem is? Because
It's
the cost of electrons is almost zero. So is it infrastructure?
It's a lot of things. So we've actually written a great piece about this. I'll give you the quick summary, but there's an article called "Critical AI Critical Capabilities." So people that are Emerge is the website, EMERJ. Critical Capabilities is the name of the article. We talk about a set of prerequisites for AI deployment. What do we need to have in place to even meaningfully think about this stuff? Never mind get value out the back end. What do we need to do to even realistically want to start? And to some degree, infrastructure is part of it. So having the data infrastructure where we not only have enough data volumes coming in the front door, potentially we have enough in a corpus, a meaningfully recent corpus that maybe we can train a system on. We need that data to be harmonized. So if we sell in a bunch of different channels, we need all of those sales to go to a common place and have a CRM that we can pull information from in kind of a meaningful way. So the pipes and the chutes and the ladders have to be set up. That's for sure. To some degree, there's also concerns here around understanding from an executive level what it takes to breathe life into an AI project. So a lot of the time, we could stay, unfortunately, still maybe most of the time in the enterprise, leadership is expecting us to plug in an AI solution. So, oh, cool, you can do a recommendation engine. We run a I don't know, $500,000 a year, like e-commerce business, plug it in, plug it in. Let's just see if it improves things. Plug it in. And they don't understand that all the places where we store data from purchase data to user engagement on site to email open rates to, like past purchases and crazy stuff from the CRM about where they like geolocations, all of this stuff has to be yanked in. And then we have to be able to experiment and iterate with it. They don't realize that there's entirely new teams have to be spun up and trained. Entirely new ways of organizing our core data have to be conjured. And then we have to test in kind of a painful way to figure out which of these permutations will, if any, and by the way, it's not always one of them, if any, are going to actually garner value out the back end. Now, recommendations is not a maybe for the future of e-commerce. It's a definitely. So this is not like well, AI is kind of flimsy. Like I'm definitely of the belief that there's certain trends that like you're either investing in the foundations of today or you're setting yourself up for failure in the future, and recommendations are in there. But leadership gets frustrated after the third month of cleaning data only, and they're like, are we still cleaning that stuff? Done with that project. Give me something I can plug in. This is a mess. Why are these guys asking us to do all this hard work? So there's also an executive understanding here, Steele. That's another big part of it. And the other part of it as well is around talent. So we need in-house data science talent that'll understand our assets. And we need subject matter experts in our business who can actually talk to those data scientists, right? If you give me, Steele, let's just say I work at, and I could give you horror stories about this stuff in the real world, but let's just say I'm in some dark division of Wells Fargo somewhere, okay? And I say we need AI. Go hire me. We're Wells Fargo, so we have a lot of money. Go hire me like 6 people out of Carnegie Mellon with PhDs in AI. Just give me 6 of them. And then we want them to help with this fraud application for our anti-money laundering kind of efforts, for example. These Carnegie Mellon guys don't understand the context of money laundering. They don't know those common patterns. They don't know what data to look out for. They don't know what new data they might need. They don't have a context on the problem. And the guys who understand the problem don't even understand that data can feed algorithms to detect stuff. So we end up with a room that costs us, with 6 people in it, that costs us $1 million a year, and we can't get any value out of it.
Yeah.
So there's executive understanding, there's talent, there's the infrastructure, there's a lot. Yeah,
that's why it's called fintech, because you need the two to merge, or FinData or whatever, because like it's a specialized tool, it's a specialized skill set to smash the two components together, because like understanding finance is very different to understanding, because finance is not economics either. Economics is about human behavior and how humans behave, and finance is about money, and money behaves differently again, because it's about incentives and structures and prices and safe harbors and and opportunities and risk. And finance is a more fragile entity, and it's driven also by a myriad of factors. It's very complicated, and I can see why these guys might struggle a little bit to do it. But I always assume, because we talk about on this show a lot the fact that all disciplines are slowly like a black hole. We're all merging into a sort of singularity entity. And if I was thinking, if you're going to hire someone to run a room like this in order to do something like that, you're going to need a physicist, you're going to need a fintech guy, an AI guy, a finance guy. You're going to need a whole, a human development agent. You're going to need a whole suite of people to get all those different ideas to make something like this emerge. Not just not just some AI experts or some finance experts, because they're siloed disciplines that when they can't talk to each other, you end up in these data mining issues where you can't mine anything. You can't extract any meaningful data, right?
Yeah, I mean it's that bridging that gap is tough. You don't always necessarily need a physicist per se, but you certainly do need a cross-functional team. Yeah. And so the good news for companies that are moving forward is if you pick the right low-hanging fruit projects where you get to learn in a petri dish, where maybe you do get to see some business ROI, but you also get to see, hey, this is how we get a team to work together to truly understand the value of our data. Now we can replicate this in customer service. Now we can replicate this elsewhere. Building that foundation is a big part of why some companies want to move now, is because they realize if they understand those internal habits, what we could call the cultural factors, if you will, if that stuff gets dialed in, then 2 years from now, when customer service AI is way more advanced, they're going to be able to get it up and going, 3 times faster than the folks who have to learn all their first ugly lessons about data today. So a lot of the value in the near term, kind of to what you were talking about, is figuring out that hard talent mix and those team mixes and getting the data infrastructure right, and then figuring out, okay, this is how we can make AI click, because as it turns out, it's quite challenging.
That is super interesting. So next question is, a lot of people there's a big information void on AI. A lot of people are scared of AI. A lot of people love AI, and a lot of people don't even know what AI is. So what's the AI race? That's between companies, the big like Silicon Valley, or countries, and also including like open countries, development projects, or DARPA, or deep money, and or open source projects. So the AI race and longer term consequences of AI. What do you think over the long term? We're talking 25 years plus. What do you think the implications of AI are? Because obviously they're coming for finance, which is slowly being integrated. Businesses are going to go through huge AI innovations, but also countries and longer term consequences of AI. Where do you see this going? What's your future horizon vector? What's over the horizon?
Yeah, I think given a long enough time horizon, I think we are looking at a radical shift in kind of the human experience as we now know it. So, if we just talk about the AI race, and we'll just kind of can it at that, and then we can talk about sort of where the distant sort of you and me living very differently sort of comes into play. There's the famous Vladimir Putin quote about, whoever is farthest ahead in AI will rule the world, yada yada. And that's a bit of hyperbole, but there's certainly a grain of truth there that the economic benefits of astronomically pulling ahead in terms of artificial intelligence, the economic benefits, the military benefits, will be really quite grandiose. And I think the United States owes a lot of its influence globally to the fact that it's powerful. It's monetarily powerful, it's militarily powerful. I think some of us lament how many camps we have around the world and other people's soil and whatnot, right? I'm not saying like I condone all of it. I'm just saying
that's the reality.
Some of that influence is lent to that, and it's also lent to the fact that we develop the tech that the rest of the world kind of uses. And I think also America has a pretty good value prop. I think in general, kind of like the independence and whatnot, I think people like that, right? It's harder for China to sell China to like a French guy. Like, oh no, it's cool, man. The emperor's up at the top, and like it's good, man. It's good. I'm telling you. Like, they did stuff to their last king had like a really tough time. It was like super hard for him. So they're kind of like they're done with that phase, I think. So I think it's also we got a decent value prop here. But a lot of it undeniably has to do with the predominance in technology and in economy and in military. And I think this next wave of tech, of artificial intelligence, is really going to set the stage for that. So ultimately, the current kind of grand race is a US and China sort of race. And I think what we're going to have to figure out here, clearly sort of where these economies settle at the end of this hubbub is going to sort of give us a new grounding of who starts where and how much money we have for R&D. There was a Trump sort of kicked off some kind of notice about nearly doubling what was predicted for so 2020's AI budget sort of getting doubled for 2021. The NSF, I think, has like 70% more money. There's a lot of different sort of branches of the government that get a lot more AI funding. Big predominant efforts for the U.S. in improving basic research. Big predominant efforts in improving public-private partnerships. But a lot of it is honestly about what they're calling maintaining AI leadership, which is really just the AI race. It's really understanding that sort of this is how power will be wielded. I think that where this may be taking us, and it's somewhat unfortunate, is that China is going to develop AI kind of in their way, and I think the West broadly is going to develop AI in their way. And I think that there will be a clash between the relative advantages of those systems. And I could talk a little bit about those relative advantages to some degree, but I think those are going to come to a head.
Because in this world we're used to sort of with the internet has been a great neutralizer in the world. It's sort of a level playing field. Once anyone can do anything and shape the internet in a certain way, but we're realizing that phase of the internet is now over. And there's sort of barriers, like AI raises this concern. There's sort of barriers and development paths that you can go down. AI might develop a more surveillance type AI. Russia might do its own thing, and the United States might do its own thing. So you end up with these different trajectories of AI. Do you like that? Do you not like that? Do you think it's interesting? What do you think about that? And what does it have for what implications does it have for the long-term consequences of AI?
I mean, I think those cannot be understated. Like we really, there's a lot of consequences here. So I was just over in Paris, so you've got your Eiffel Tower behind you. I was just in Paris for the OECD's AI Policy Observatory launch, and we're working on a white paper with those folks and doing some interviews over there. And I was speaking with the Minister of Digital of France, so kind of like to some degree, the CTO of France, about sort of this exact topic. And I think that there's a lot of tension and understood tension that the West needs to brook its efforts around regulation, also to ensure that it's keeping an emphasis on innovation, because they know that there are countries, really China the only one of worth, I think, ultimately. I think Russia's interesting because they have nukes. They're not interesting for AI, I think, right now. No. Well, although God bless them. I mean, they're interesting for AI as far as political, like flubbing. I do think that 2020 we're going to see some real stuff. I think we're going to see some real stuff when it comes to fiddle-faddling with the political system and being able to leverage AI for kind of sowing discord. And I think this is one of the considerations here for the West, is that there are countries that don't have to bear in mind privacy, security, inclusion, human rights for their AI efforts. And also there are countries that can barricade their own nations from certain kinds of influence, but can go right through the front door of our very permeable walls and influence, everybody from a senator to a farmer. With whatever kinds of messaging they want, whether it's YouTube channels or what have you. But their own environments can be very nicely coaxed, and they can really build the right vision for the people that they control. And that I think there was a supposition, even so much as, let's say, 3-4 years ago. And I've been thinking about this sort of AI China race for quite a long time, and spoke not that long ago in Shanghai at a United Nations event thinking about these same topics. Even so much as 3-4 years ago, I think it was almost inevitably the understanding that clearly innovation at a grandiose degree is not really going to happen, under China's system. And clearly the people will revolt against this sort of Orwellian stuff, and will not really be able to maintain and yearn for that kind of a system. But I think that that's quite unclear. And I think a lot of folks are really understanding that there may be big advantages to being able to wield the public sector, the private sector, academia as wings of the political party, as wings of a singular political party that gets to think long ball, because they get their rulers for life, like ancient China type stuff. You know what I mean? Like Mao type stuff, like purge your enemies and like stay on top kind of stuff, and so there's actual advantages to long ball planning, to the wielding of sort of all the facets of a society, and that may yield, let's say 10 years out, farther reaching capabilities in terms of making money, in terms of military power, in terms of security applications of artificial intelligence. So I think this is what the West has to wrestle with. Surely we've got to figure out our inclusion and our privacy and all of the near-term concerns that are most of the conversations of the United Nations. But I think the OECD understands this, in my opinion. I don't think the United Nations does for the most part, at least from my experience, that the West also needs to ensure that they can make up for some of its competitive deficits, because we certainly have them. These two systems you speak of, I think, will be a fault line in geopolitics, as they already are, and that will, I believe, be accentuated by the developments in AI.
We've seen the opening salvos of this. One of the opening salvos was Russiagate, where it's not quite AI driven, but this was the topic. Trump manipulated the election through the Russians, through buying Facebook ads, and that was the way to wedge the conversation into the United States. The other one was this 5G China company, Huawei. And this was framed as a technology debate, but actually this is all leveraging up to the AI debate, where they've sort of gone in by stealth to try and get these conversation points into the Senate and into the Congress. And what do you say? Do you think that there needs to be you mentioned the OECD, okay, or maybe the G7 nations. Should the G7 nations or some form of collective countries start to invest in an international, because international committee or a new body, a governing body or something? Because obviously, like, the West is weakened in the fact that they do develop in a more open and transparent way, in line with what America has. America opens up. That's what it does. It goes out and it forces people to trade, which is a great thing sometimes. It opens up markets and it opens up trade, and it wants people to play on a level playing field. But that completely contradicts with the safety and security of some of these AI concerns. And the other one is open source, which is a whole of community effort, not whole of government, a whole of community effort. And that really does expose some certain weaknesses. It also has some certain strengths. So do you think there has to be a more some sort of global committee, global innovation, a new some sort of G7 thing where this AI is really put front and center, something in line with the IMF or the World Bank, or should it just continue to fall into the purview of the IMF, the World Bank, the OECD, and national security committees?
Exactly where this lands, I think, is going to be very interesting. I've really enjoyed what I've seen at the OECD. I'm a big supporter of the UN's various AI efforts, counterterrorism. I've done a lot of speaking for Interpol, for example, on AI. I'm about it, but I do think that there needs to be some kind of focus on, but how will we also be strong? So I think the ideal way to skin the cat here, the majority of conversations, at least within a UN context that I've seen, written, video, or in person, which has been a good number between Geneva, New York, and other places, has been that kind of security, privacy, inclusion are sort of like the themes over and over. There's not enough women writing the code. These algorithms might not pick up on certain races, or short people might be called children or something. Nobody really cares about that, but race stuff people do. So these are, I think, important things. To be thinking about this early in tech is, in my opinion, great. And to some degree, there's things to be proud about that in terms of, like, Western value stuff. I don't think like Western values are inherently good. I think there's some of them that I happen to like, and those are a few of them. So I think those are nice.
I'm a fan of human rights, definitely.
Yeah, I'm down. I'm down with the human rights ball game. I'm down with, there's some Western stuff. But there's some Western stuff where I'm super down. And like being able to say what, freedom of speech, right? The whole OECD country stuff, right? The OECD countries, they call each other like-minded nations, right? Where like you get to pray to stuff and nobody breaks your legs. Like you get to tweet stuff and nobody like breaks your legs. You get to like run for office and nobody like shoots you on a bridge. That's what they have in common, is like people can do that stuff.
Big fan.
Yeah, it's cool. I'm all about it. So, but I think that the OECD has that in common. The UN obviously doesn't, right? Because there's a lot of different kinds of governance in the UN, and China has a lot of pull. To some degree, Russia has a good deal of pull, of course, as being in that
the
kind
Security
of
Council.
Yep. Sort of the big group. So the powerful folks. So that sort of prevents, I think, these conversations from being had in a stronger way. Does there need to be a NATO-like minded countries kind of thing? I think it's debatable. I will say that I would like for nations that want those values to ask the question, how can we foster the strengthening and assurance of those values along with strengthening our economies and our relative technological predominance and competitiveness? So how can we have them both sort of bleed into each other in terms of policies and directions that can hopefully enhance both in so much as we can? I think that conversation should be much more frequently had, and I don't think it honestly is very much, particularly in the UN. Can't necessarily blame them. Again, they've got other parties in there. But yeah, to your question, I'll say this much. I think the conversation needs to be had that we don't just need to regulate and put in values. We also need to innovate and make sure that we don't fall behind, because our values are nothing if we're weak.
Yeah.
And I believe that ironclad. I think you're safe when you're strong, and that's straight life.
I like this reference to NATO because it reminds me of the Cold War, and it's like because America, and I won't go on about this too much, but basically America is isolating itself geopolitically, but economically or digitally, there's a race out there to expand to all those countries that are yet to align with a team. And the Belt and Road Initiative or something like that is not only about infrastructure and ports and physical investments and this capital overflow from China, but it's also about bringing with them their ideas, their values, and also their technology systems. And a lot of underdeveloped countries, whether you're in Kazakhstan or Sri Lanka or even arguably all the way up to Italy now, who feel like they've been a little bit left out, are happy to have investments. I mean, UK and US, big, obviously, strategic partners in many ways, having a big fallout over Huawei over there. So you can see that it's kind of a stealth war going on in the business world and the AI world and in the internet world, where there's different. And I like this NATO reference because I feel like after the state of play, there might be a new digital curtain that just falls down. It doesn't mean a severing of the internet, but it's a digital curtain. Is that the good word?
I mean, I'm not going to lie. I really think the momentum is taking us towards said digital curtain. And I mean, the unfortunate thing is, I mean, it's permeable on the West side, but it's not permeable backwards. And so I think there might be advantages to accrue. I mean, if Confucius is your great intellectual figure, like, he's got some really good doctrines to keep that alignment on point, right? There's no Pericles sort of like figure out there, right? I mean, there's no Orwell out there. I mean, it's down, man. It's real. Like, they're about it. So I think that if you can control that environment, I think there's really, really beefy benefits to sort of potentially maintaining that control and inculcating in the way that behooves the single party's interests. And I can't even blame them for trying to keep it alive, because I think if you were in their boots, you'd arguably do the same thing. But yes, I think we're headed towards said curtain. I'm not pleased with it, because I happen to believe that among the things that would be the greatest contributors to relative peace and prosperity would be the cosmopolitan spirit having as much breadth as it can have, as much communication across borders, as much translation, as much business. Because, you go to a Chinese university or you meet Chinese diplomats, you eat dumplings or you eat frickin' hot dogs. It doesn't matter. It's like, people are people. And if you can get together with folks, I really don't think it's a people issue. I think it's an ideology and it's a party issue. And so having those permeations be very strong, I think runs counter to peace writ large, and runs towards, I think, a state of nature development of AI, which I think in stretching 30 years would be a very spooky world if it's entirely combative. So I fear that said Iron Curtain is going to happen. I would not encourage it. I don't hope for it. But I do think that if it does happen, the West will have to ask, how can we still be strong? And are there ways to do that without being bullies?
And this is my point to. I have to plug the USTP here and say, if you want to mitigate against this, just like you could have mitigated against some of these viruses or something, check out the USTP website. They mitigate against existential crises to humanity, and they have great talent inside of there talking about how to mitigate AI challenges in the future. So check out the Transhumanist-Party for that as well. Hey, Daniel, I know you got to go and get some sleep. You've been boom, you've been rushing around and doing all this sort of stuff and everything, so I know you got to go get some rest. Hey, I have loved this conversation. I really want to thank you so much. This has been really, really, really fascinating. And the world of AI is huge. It's complicated. It's a black box. And I just wanted to say as well, with China, just one more question actually on China.
Go for it.
From what I can see, they haven't done a lot of real high-tech innovation. They've stolen a lot of patents and all that, but a lot of the low-tech stuff is because of the labor costs, because they've got, how a lot of Chinese AI is like, it can recognize people's faces, or it can recognize signs or buildings, or it can do that a lot faster over there. But is that because of cheap Chinese labor, where they have a factory of, say, 1 million or 2 million people who are taking photos of everything and feeding it through the machine, and so it can recognize roads and bridges and birds? And is that the reason that they've really accelerated in that over the West? Or is that wrong?
There's a lot here. So the computer vision is a big push from the top. Obviously, if you need to, keep ironclad, if everybody needs a score, you got to darn well watch them. You know what I'm saying? And so computer vision, there's money. If you want to be rich, go to China and sell AI that could do something with cameras. Like, that's how you get rich. Go to China and, I don't know, detect Uyghurs with computer vision or something, right? That's where the money's at. Rough and tumble talk, but I mean, that's where the money's at. So if you're going to control, you got to see. And so vision is a push from the top. To some degree, there is cheaper labor there. So I know companies that operate in the States and are trying to start partnerships with U.S. hospitals for diagnosing, let's say, lung diseases with AI that can sort of detect, let's say, cancerous tumors in the chest. And they have PhDs in China that are actually doing the labeling. So it's not easy to look at medical imagery and make firm diagnostics, right? You actually need to be trained. You need to be very intelligent. China has a tremendous number of very talented people with very advanced degrees. And pound for pound, they're going to cost less than somebody in Boston, I'll tell you that. So there is an advantage there, but there's also a push from the top. There's also definitely a push from the top. So there's that as well. And I think that there is this question, will this kind of copycatting, this is the Amazon of China, this is the Google of China, this is will that evolve into something beyond it? There is talk of, culturally, is it harder to sort of innovate? I really think that there might be something culturally about saving face and about competition and about breaking the mold in the culture. But I think that as their economy continues to swell, as they continue to understand and sort of feel the power that they have and garner more and more sort of academic institutions to develop these technologies, I think there will be a lot of novel, genuine, really powerful technologies that come out of there.
All right.
Yeah. So spooky stuff ahead, but I'm not going to underestimate China's ability to innovate in, let's say, the next 5 years.
Wow, fantastic. Look, sorry for keeping you over time. Really appreciated those comments. That was a question that has been burning with me for a while. The AI thing is huge. And, thank you so much for coming on the show. Look, I got to thank Chairman Gennady. I got to thank David Shoemaker, and of course Superfan Mike DeVerde for helping this, and Future of Humanity Project for keeping the show on the road. I'd love to keep the show on the road in these times of crisis. I think we as a community need each other more than ever. So if you want to help support, share the video around, watch the videos, tell your friends about us, hit subscribe. If I can get to 1,000 subscribers, I can monetize the channel. That would help me a lot. So thank you, everybody, you wonderful people out there, and thanks to the USTP also, and thanks to the superstar. Thanks, Daniel, for coming on. Great conversation, really, really great conversation. I'd like to hear anything you got to ever say, come on again soon, and we'll talk to you more about AI. I'll put you on with maybe even David Kelly. David Kelly's an AI expert.
Yeah, you told me about that fella. I got to Google him.
Yeah, we can run you two against each other and hear different opinions, because I
like
have
fun.
some different opinions to you right now, but I wanted to get your take on things, and you know, your take on things is much better than mine, so that's fantastic. Thank you so much, sir, for coming on this episode of Debt Nation, where we are busy putting death out of business.